Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I am proud to bring you the Pep Talk with John Carl Pepe, a living legend. Greetings, John. How are you?
How's it going, Hercules?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to tonight's show. I'll holler if you need me.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Yes, it's going to be a really good one tonight, folks. So first I want to kick it off with yesterday it was free comic book day across the country, and we had our event at the Joker's Child, and it was absolutely wonderful. I want to thank everybody who came out to the free comic book day at Joker's Child or at your local comic shop. We don't know what the future of the free comic book day event is going to be like going forward, but we will see. If you know anything, a little inside baseball there about the comic distribution system and who actually owns Free Comic Book Day. It's very fascinating stuff, worthy of a deep dive if you want to take a look into that. As we are recording, though, it is Sunday, May the 4th. And yes, that is Star Wars Day across the world. Intergalactically, we'll say. And I want to wish everybody a happy Star Wars Day. I always like to bring up on this day my friend AJ, who refers to this as the Hallmark holiday for Star Wars. He is Star Wars Orthodox, as he says, and he celebrates Star Wars Day on May 27th. But so AJ, I know it's the Hallmark holiday, but also happy Star Wars Day to you, buddy. But that's not what we're here to talk about, folks. We are here to talk about um, uh, 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 some call him a comedian, some call him an actor. He preferred to call himself a song and dance man. We have talked about him a lot on the show. We mostly did a year long theme last year for this gentleman, and because it would have been his 75th birthday last year and 40 years since he passed, depending on what you believe. And I felt it appropriate to kind of kick off this month and do this month's show, honoring him, talking about him. A couple reasons. A brand new documentary came out called "Thank You Very Much." It is fantastic, and hopefully we're going to talk about that a bit tonight as well. It is also the it was May 16th of 1984 when he passed away, depending on what you believe. So I figured what a great way to honor him once again by bringing together four stellar past guests. We have one person who I think is hopefully on the way. So Hercules, again, if one more person does join, I think he is traveling, but we're going to see if we can get him to pop in. So bringing back tonight, my first guest is a old friend of mine, big brother to me in many ways, and somebody who is just a font of pop culture knowledge and experiences. And I remember late nights in the 90s talking about Taxi and Andy Kaufman, and in case you haven't figured out, that's who we're talking about tonight. And all the stuff that we're gonna dive into tonight. He's been on several times before. Always happy to have him. He has a great YouTube channel if you're a fan of music, specifically the band Fish. The YouTube page is Blanks and Postage, and he is Mathew Lewis Demek. Mathew, say hello.
How are you tonight, John? So happy to be a part of the Pep Talk. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to a great show tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Glad to have you back as always. My next guest is part of the roundtable. His last appearance was actually with Mathew. I love bringing different guests, different friends together to kind of have these great ideas coalesce and have great conversations. So friend of mine who I work with at the Joker's Child and is a valuable asset to our team, even though he can only devote a little bit of time. But boy, what he does, it's like he packs three times the amount of time that he's there when he's working with us. But also just a great guy in general. One of the biggest Transformers fans in the world that I know. Also a big fan of wrestling, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well, because Andy is very tied into wrestling as well. He used to work for WWE, but is presently a writer for the popbreak.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Dworkis. Say hello, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on once again. And man, you are way overselling me on my capabilities here, but always appreciate being put over on the air.
No, Michael, don't worry. I think what you're gonna have to offer is gonna be really cool. I got some good questions for you. So, and then lastly, until hopefully our other person gets to join us, is a man who was on the show a couple times before. Again, as last year, he myself and Curt Clendenin contributed in a podcast crossover. And what's really funny is the chapter that we did a year ago no longer exists presently. We're working on getting that audio back up on the YouTube channel, but so that sort of is out of print, we're going to say. But we'll try and get a second printing on that done. But he is, man, he was podcasting before podcasting was even a thing. He has developed this great network, this great community of people who share experiences. He shares experiences. It's a great way, just a man who really just goes above and beyond, chronicling the fascinating and the mundane in a fascinating way. And I just love what he does. I love that he's been doing it for so long. Had the opportunity to finally physically hang out with him last summer, and I hope to do it again this summer, which we'll talk about later on. But ladies and gentlemen, curator of the Overnightscape Underground. He used to be called the Rampler, and some people still do. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Edward Nora. Say hello, Frank.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. And I want to say I am also a big Fish fan. So, yes.
Oh yeah, that's I think I told both of you guys this is a setup to.
I know we're not talking about fish tonight, but maybe we could change it to a fish episode. I don't know.
That'd be very Andy, just buck expectations, right? No, actually, I think I mentioned to both of you guys, you and Matt, that I would look forward to maybe doing a show with you guys talking a little fish. And I don't know if you're familiar with Matt's YouTube page, Blanks and Postage, but you should definitely check it out. It's really cool.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's get into it. So I think the first thing I want to do is I want to get a sense from each of you, because I think it's very hard, because it's sort of like he has, I know Frank, you do have a few years old on us. Michael, you have a few years under Matt and I. Matt and I right now are baseline 50. That's our baseline point here. So we, so I think for a lot of us, we kind of grew up with Andy always sort of being there. To actually pick out the first time that I think we experienced Andy Kaufman, or had that awareness of who Andy Kaufman was. I will accept Taxi, but I'm also looking for maybe that first time that you realized there was more to Andy than Taxi. So I'm gonna actually start with Frank on this one. Frank, what was your first experience?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, because I was a little too young to watch Saturday Night Live when it first came out. Was it in '75?
Mm-hmm.
So I just remember sometime in the '70s, say the later '70s, he was on TV, and I remember my family talking about it. Oh yeah, he's really good. I can't remember exactly what he was doing, but it was definitely before Taxi, and it was in some TV appearance where he was doing something strange. So, but people really knew about him in my family, and so that's sort of my first memory. I don't remember specifically.
Yep. Pretty much. I mean, that's sort of the thing, especially. I think we're all pretty much raised on television to a certain degree, and there are certain things that are sort of always there. I know that I had a life before Star Wars, but like Star Wars has sort of always been there in my conscious memory. So it is a little hard sometimes to single that out. When you started to kind of grasp who he was, because probably it was some of these, because he did a lot of daytime show stuff before Taxi and things like that, or even during Taxi. What was your thoughts on him?
Well, there's that great footage of him on David Letterman's daytime show, and I watched that daytime show. It was only on for a few months. I believe it was in 1980, in the summer of 1980. So I was like a huge fan of David Letterman, and I don't specifically remember that episode where Andy comes on and he's coughing and begging for money. Everyone knows that clip, right? But I may have seen that. I don't know, because I watched that show religiously. It was on, it was summer vacation from school. So I may have seen that one. But then later, I think, like, I was never like a huge, like, fan of Andy Kaufman in terms of following him for everything he did. But he was just sort of, like you said, he was there. He was always there on TV. He was always sort of in the background. And yeah, so he was just sort of part of that pop culture stew that we all sort of were soaking in.
Frank, what a great segue there, because someone who I didn't think was going to show up, but I knew that we were going to have some surprises tonight. You had mentioned Stuart Hersh, ladies and gentlemen,
Whoa, that was an accident. Yeah.
making an appearance, not in April or October to talk about his guests at Chiller, but to talk about the time that he saw Andy on stage. And Stuart, I'm so happy you could make it. Say hello to everybody really quick. Just basically getting through asking people their first impressions of Andy growing up.
Wow. Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I just got in like 10 minutes ago and then I got your thing. I was like, okay, let me get in this. So yeah, I was, I was taken by Andy, like everybody was on TV. And then all of a sudden I heard that he was doing this concert at Town Hall in New York City, which has been so like never mentioned and really forgotten. I don't know why, but it preceded the the big Carnegie Hall show, which everybody knew of, and it was really cool. I was with my best friend, and it was around the time when I needed glasses, and I didn't know it yet. So he wore glasses, and he was lending me his glasses to look at who this awful guy was that opened up the show, named Tony Clifton, from where I was. And it really took us literally to like the middle of the show, because we weren't like right up front, to realize, I mean, the middle of the set, the opening set, to realize that was Andy. And my friend kept going, "That's Andy Kaufman." I'm like, "Is that Andy Kaufman?" Because all we really knew was the foreign man character. And we had no idea what this Tony Clifton thing was about.
So you had, so I want to get back to that a little bit later. But so what was your first, what was the first time you heard of or heard mention or saw him maybe on television or something? Because I know you were probably in that entertainment circles, and you probably heard rumblings maybe when he was doing stand up, or was it when he hit television doing the talk show circuit first, or was it Taxi?
No, definitely way before Taxi.
Yeah.
If anything, it was SNL.
Right. Okay.
But maybe, I mean, I'm a little lost on the order, and I should know this, but SNL was first, or no, Dick Van Dyke summer show was first, right? That he appeared on?
I think that might have been before SNL. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little ishy on that too. If anybody knows,
Dick Van Dyke thing, the Dick Van Dyke thing I never knew about until like years and years and years later,
right.
With the collectors, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he did this. We got a clip of this." Maybe, I don't know, Mike Douglas show, stuff like that, where he was going around just doing the circuit.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated, as my parents were too, because this guy was just like, what is he gonna do next?
Nice. So, all right. So I'm going to come back to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about what Andy did that night after Tony was on stage. Matt, what was your first recollection / impressions of seeing Andy as a young lad?
Oh, hi, everybody, by the way.
Hi, Stuart.
I just realized, you said there's a lot. Okay, so yeah, I'm good. I'm good now.
I'm so glad you made it then.
Yeah.
Well, first, want to wish everyone a happy May the 4th. Hope everyone is celebrating the right way today. I guess for me, my mom and dad were big fans of Taxi. My mom and dad watched Saturday Night Live, and so I was familiar with him. And I remember when he died, when I'm, being a kid, around 1983. My consciousness of him kind of went away for a little while. And then I really got into wrestling, really big into wrestling. And lo and behold, there's Andy again. And, he, kind of intrigued me, not so much with the female wrestling, but with his feud with Jerry the King Lawler. Because obviously, you knew him as this big movie star, and the further you got into it, you could kind of see him as a, as a bad guy. He was a villain. Really, really kind of threw me for a loop. But it wasn't until I was in college when I was, reading a lot of things that were outside the box, a lot of articles that were, suggestive of kind of counterculture and, other things that I hadn't necessarily been exposed to while I was growing up. And this was the first that I read about him possibly not being dead, possibly faking his death. And boy, was that the missing piece that sent me down the rabbit hole. And from that moment, I began kind of reverse engineering, his career and, seeing his appearance on Fridays and watching all of the SNL appearances, reading books, really, starting to get interested in it. And one afternoon, I went to the Museum of Television and Radio in Manhattan. They were having a festival of some really rare Andy Kaufman footage. They had his primetime special, stuff that you would never see. And these were even in the days when YouTube was in its infancy. And I spent the entire day just immersed in a movie theater type atmosphere, seeing greatest television appearances and his greatest, stand-up appearances, the evening at the Improv, the Johnny Cash show, believe it or not.
That was great.
And that sent me, trying to find all this stuff on DVD and trying to hunt it all down. So that was really where the journey began.
Nice. We're gonna get back to some of that. The rabbit hole of and just wealth of material that is out there, because I definitely have some thoughts about that. But Michael, so I just want to get from you, as far as your experience. When was the first time you heard of, saw, or were interested in Andy Kaufman?
Well, it's gonna be in the wrestling scene. I mean, growing up, obviously I was 4 years old when he passed. So I didn't really have any direct exposure. I do recall reruns of Taxi at some point, and obviously, stuff that was floating around media. I do recall my parents talking about this, wacky comedian at some point that I never had an opportunity to see. But it came probably around, I would say, when I was in high school, when Jerry the King Lawler made his jump to the WWF. And that was one of the selling points he pushed. He feuded with the late, great Andy Kaufman. You know what? Let's dive into that rabbit hole. And man, was that a rabbit hole.
So when you found out, at that point, I think YouTube was probably a thing, right?
No, this was before YouTube.
This was even before YouTube.
We're talking late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. Okay. So because same thing with you, Matt, as well. In a pre-YouTube era, Michael, how were you able to track this stuff down? Because
seeing the radio and TV was great for that, actually.
Yeah, TV they would have reruns. I mean, there was some footage played from WWF of Lawler's feud with Andy Kaufman, and if I remember correctly, there were some VHS tapes that we got our hands on, and were able to watch a little bit of the history of who this billed as a comedian, even though he said he never was one, but got a little history lesson on who he really was about. And I appreciate that you think I'm younger than I really am. My first foray into research was YouTube, so I appreciate that.
You're younger than me. And so therefore,
I'm feeling like the old man in the room here.
Me too. Come on.
I am older than I look.
Guys, to be fair, Hercules is thousands of years old. So
no, he beats us all. Hey.
I mean, if we're counting reincarnation.
So because from my experience, I had older siblings. I was the youngest by 10 years. So I was allowed to watch all this stuff. I saw, I knew Taxi. I knew the Letterman appearances, not so much the daytime show, but the late night stuff. I think one of the first times I saw Tony Clifton was an appearance on Letterman, and so I watched a lot of this stuff as a kid, and it really stuck with me. I had that awareness of when he died, and it really felt like to me back then almost immediately there was the oh, or did he, in my awareness and my experience. And then
Right.
again, you know, like Matt had kind of said, you put it away for a little while. And it wasn't until Frank attended the Andy Kaufman press conference back in, well, so actually, no, in 1999, in preparation for when Man on the Moon was coming out, it relit that spark, that interest. There were two great books that came out at the time. Bill Zemm's Lost in the Funhouse and Bob Zamuta's first book, Andy Kaufman Revealed. And so that really popped it into that. But again, I wasn't looking on the early stages or the early, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s internet for the Andy Kaufman clips, because I was now reading about that stuff and reading takes on that stuff. So it wasn't until the Weird New Jersey spring 2008 issue, the article written by Chris Gethard about the Andy Kaufman press conference that Frank attended, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little later too. That's when it really set me down that rabbit hole. And the thing I wanted to mention before, you know, after what Matt was saying, is that Andy was in the public eye and was doing things for a little about 10 years, 73 to 83, 84. Okay, so a little over a decade. He accumulated so many hours worth of material that even today, when you go on YouTube, you can see most, but not all of it. And that it's these little breadcrumbs that were left in the past for people to discover in the future. This kind of struck me several times while watching the documentary, Thank You Very Much, which premiered March 28th. It is screening, I believe, Lynn Margulis is at a screening tonight in Portland, Oregon. She's been going around doing screenings, Q&A. She did a great interview with Mark Maron on his WTF podcast that I highly recommend people checking out as well. And so that, and part of what she talks about in this documentary is the ripples, like, you know, that what Andy did was like a pebble in a pond, and the ripples extend and reach out. And to kind of go back to the wrestling thing, so Michael, I want to bring it back to you. Two questions for you regarding that. When you worked at WWE, was there an acknowledgement? Was Andy talked about? Was it something that people, because I know, you know, yeah, they own that footage. They were putting it on you know, VHS packages back in the day and still repeating that. But what was the level of awareness and acknowledgement while you were there, while you were working there?
He was like one of the celebrities turned wrestlers. You know, if some of you might be familiar with the term kayfabe, which is a popular wrestling term when, hey, it's what you see on TV is what you get. That's who they are. You don't break kayfabe. And for the longest time, if anyone would ever bring up, like, yeah, Lawler broke his neck. Yeah, he got in the ring. He was a wrestler. He didn't break that. And, you know, you could tell people would say with, you know, certain tone, certain edge in the voice, like, yeah, we know what really happened. But from that perspective, being there, when you talked about Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler, yeah, that happened. That was real. They hated each other.
It's true, you know, and it's funny. One of the things that struck me while watching the documentary too was that everything about Andy was kayfabe. That wrestling.
What does kayfabe stand for?
So kayfabe was a wrestling term when they wanted wrestlers to stay in character. So very often, and this is something, unfortunately, a lot of people who follow wrestling feel that the idea of kayfabe doesn't exist anymore, because the idea is that if you would see wrestlers in an airport, you wouldn't have the good guy and the bad guy share a taxi, or they wouldn't travel together, because the idea is that they hate each other. So if they were near each other, you'd get a fight breaking out in an airport. So the idea is that even in character, you'd have certain, you know, outlandish, you know, they would wear the robes, they would talk with a certain accent. They would keep that the whole way through and through. Nowadays, we don't really see that anymore, but it was very popular from the 50s all the way through the mid 90s.
Really, where kayfabe originated was the carnivals. That was kayfabe is carny speak for there's an outsider here. Keep it in, you know, keep things quiet. So when someone would go into the locker room at a wrestling match and it was someone who wasn't in on the secret, they'd yell, kayfabe, kayfabe, like they were yelling somebody's name, kayfabe. And that meant everybody stay in character.
Yeah.
So if somebody yelled kayfabe, that was the sign.
So
stay in
don't
character.
break the illusion.
Yeah.
I get it.
Exactly.
Don't break the
You had-
illusion.
Commit
Yeah.
to the bit, and that's something Andy always did. He committed to the bit. Except with Andy, the bit was always changing too, and that was the fun as well. The story was always changing, and that's sort of something that I know Frank, Curt, and I have experienced in some of our experiences with the Andy Kaufman Live stuff. You commit to the bit, but the story does always change. But there's always some bit of a through line. Michael,
It just seems like Andy committed to the bit, and then if he broke out of it, he was automatically in another bit.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So,
It's
there
like
are so many layers.
it's like it's I mean, I think REM nails it perfectly in the lyrics. If you believe there's nothing up my sleeve, then nothing is cool. And Andy, are you locked in the punch? Are you so
Yes.
far into what you're doing that you are just in danger of just shutting everybody out?
Yeah, I interpreted that as are you locked in the punch? Did you fake your own death and now you can't get out of it? You can't come back, right?
That's a great read too. Yeah. Absolutely. Michael, the other thing I wanted to mention or ask you about the wrestling, your thoughts. So yeah, Andy was one of those early celebrities, if not one of the first, to really get involved in professional wrestling and really cross into that world. And something again I thought was fascinating with the with the documentary is that idea that he was also being a sacrificial lamb to give focus for the ire of the women's lib movement. He was putting himself out there as the wicker man, right? The straw man that you could beat up on, right? And that's why he had to win, because he had to keep that hate, right? So I find it interesting, Michael, that in the wake of Andy Kaufman, and whatever happened to him for him to fall out of public favor, where to the point where the wrestling stuff was getting fewer and far between, his illness had set in. So the year the year Andy died was the first WrestleMania, and by WrestleMania you had Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T, and all of a sudden you had this celebrity boom beginning. So Michael, Andy Kaufman dies within a month of the first WrestleMania. Coincidence or conspiracy?
I'm gonna go with coincidence on that one. I mean, if someone shouted kayfabe, I would say, yeah, it's conspiracy, absolutely. But no doubt, I mean, he would have been front and center. I mean, absolutely. With the WrestleMania hitting pay-per-view and television, it was one of the biggest deals, and yeah, they brought out celebrities for it. I mean, Vince McMahon capitalized on the popularity of bringing celebrities into pro wrestling, and up until that point, Andy and Lawler, their shtick down in Memphis wrestling. Now again, this is at a time where we didn't have the internet, we didn't know what was going on in other promotions. We relied on magazines, TV, radio. Bill Apter, professional wrestling journalist. If not for guys like him, no one would ever know what happened in the territories. But Andy brought it to a national scale. And absolutely, I mean, if given the opportunity, Vince McMahon would have had him everywhere.
Well, there's an interesting footnote to that story, because, when I was a kid, I learned about Andy's involvement in wrestling through those Bill Apter magazines. And Andy was friends with Bill Apter. They were buddies because they were huge wrestling nerds, and they were both from Long Island. So
Bill has the neck brace, I believe.
Bill has the neck brace.
Wow.
And Bill took him to the Garden, I guess, 1980. And, Andy was looking for an in, and Bill brought him backstage, and he introduced him to Vince McMahon. Only problem was was Vince McMahon Sr.
This is right.
Yep.
This is-
He didn't have the
Ah.
foresight that Vince McMahon Jr. had 3 years later. So
Right.
and it's a couple of years too early, but it was because of that Bill Apter said, I'm going to reach out to Jerry Lawler down in Memphis. They're a little bit smaller down there. You know, they were like the minor leagues.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the Memphis wrestlers ended up going to WWF at some point. But you're right. Vince McMahon Sr., he didn't believe in the celebrities. He didn't believe in all that because going back to the carnies, like that wrestling is a territory. That's what we stick to. He was so old fashioned. He could not see what the future would have been had he allowed it.
Which in
Right.
a way I think was also very heartbreaking for Andy, which is why he dug in so hard in the Memphis circuit and really tried to keep that going as long as possible, because Andy based his thing on classic traditional wrestling. That was that's what he grew up with because his grandma Pearl, you know. Matt, I
You know,
want
it's funny. I lost track of Andy when he got into the wrestling,
right.
because I watched some of that and I was like, where's the funny? I was looking for the funny,
Right,
you know,
right,
and
right.
and I didn't get it. You know, I maybe at my age back then, I grew up on so much of Andy, you know, oh, he's doing this shtick and that shtick, and everything was like ended with a funny joke or a punchline. And then the wrestling just started to look too serious to me. So it lost me a little bit. So you guys are in this whole other layer of it that I don't know that much about. I got videos of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting period. Again, it did alienate a lot of people. They make they talk about it really well in the documentary, about how, yeah, it's like people knew him. They wanted Laka. They wanted this, you know, they wanted Foreign Man. And then to see the Tony Clifton stuff, it really was something. And the whole time, this is kind of what Andy wanted, apparently, like that he was laughing at the dismantling of his career. And was it a way to sort of, did he know? I know they say it all happened within 6 months, but was there a sense prior to that he was ill and this is a way to make an easy exit? Was it
When did he do the PBS special in the time frame of the wrestling stuff? Was the PBS special an attempt at getting back to the original Andy Kaufman?
I think the PBS special was probably 80 or 81, and I think it was right around when that wrestling, because this all went on for several years. Lynn did the documentary Andy Kaufman, I Hate Your Guts, or the book was Andy Kaufman, I Hate Your Guts, a collection of the letters. And she also did I think the title of the documentary she did is a little different, but she has a great documentary about that, along with her I'm From Hollywood documentary that she directed as well. That really does a good overlay of that stuff, and that timetable and you know, the chronicling what was going on there. So yeah, I think it just sort of became, you know, and again, if you even want to say, you know, the thing that really I think I love about Andy Kaufman as a comic book nerd, a mythology nerd, is that he kind of created, and others around him, this mythology for himself. It is very much the hero's tale. It's the rise, the fall, and then adding in the element of, did he fake his death? It's almost like that rise again at the hero in the hero's journey, the hero story, because now he is mythological, he is legend, whether he lived or died, whether he faked his death and then got creamed by a bus 2 months later, you know, he will always live on. And these things, all of this stuff being filmed and recorded that is now available and accessible after 40 years is impressive, and it's amazing. So I kind of want to, and it wasn't just the stand-up, it wasn't just the wrestling, it wasn't just Taxi. Andy also had some movies under his credit. So Matt, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on his movie career.
Well, I have to tell you, Heart Beeps happens to be one of my favorite all-time films. And you know, I think his legacy is more than just, you know, film, TV. And it goes back to what I was saying before about how you can kind of like look under every rock and, you know, he would be there and he would be kind of ubiquitous in the media in the late 70s, early 80s. One of the things, you know, watching that film, Thank You Very Much, that I thought was really interesting, very early in the film, someone says that he was like Houdini, right? And so, you know, really Houdini could, uh, you know, mystify you, and Houdini could leave you in disbelief of what you just saw right in front of your eyes. And Andy absolutely had that quality, which to this day, people don't even, you know, he's the ultimate boy who cried wolf. But here's the thing about the movies, Taxi, all of that stuff existed for him to be able to do the things that he wanted to do, right? So he may not have, you know, whereas someone else would be their dream to be a movie star, to be a TV star. To him, it allowed him the opportunity to have the show at Carnegie Hall, to have the variety special, to wrestle, like to do the things that he always wanted to do. You know, in a lot of ways, he's kind of like a musician, right? And
to be a
you know,
busboy at Jerry's Deli.
Jerry's Deli.
well, right,
Yeah.
but or even being a panhandler on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what he wanted to do is he wanted to interact with people.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the musician thing really does ring true, besides him calling himself a song and dance man, you know, doing the Elvis impersonation, which is really what I think part of where his heart lied. Yes, Stuart.
The interesting thing about the Elvis thing, it's funny, I saw the screening of the Thank You Very Much movie in the city, and they had the I guess it was the director was there. The guys who made the film were there.
Alex Braverman. I forget who the producers are, but yeah.
Yeah. So those two
Besides
guys were
Random
there. And I watched it. I went up to one of them afterwards and I gave them this idea that I had like years ago, and I've been sitting on it because I can't do anything with it. And I said, you've done this. I said, now I've got this idea kicking around in my head for a million years. Andy Kaufman, every time he did an Elvis impersonation on TV, on any TV show, always did a different song.
Yep. And not a known song, like a deep cut.
Right. So I said, why can't somebody put a collection together legitimately and have Andy Kaufman does Elvis, which will appeal to the Andy fans and the Elvis fans.
Oh, that would be a great album.
Because it would be, it wasn't like he just did, you know, Jailhouse Rock every time it was part of the same routine. He didn't. He did a different number every time. So there's at least a dozen different Elvis songs done by Andy Kaufman as Elvis that could be a hell of a collection.
Yeah. So it's funny, in that documentary, there's one of Andy's friends describes Andy as a jazz musician. You know, he was jazz. And I was listening to WBGO a couple weeks ago, and there was somebody that described jazz as syncopation and surprise. And I felt that's Andy's shtick as well, syncopation and surprise.
His whole routine was setting up this structure, right? And the structure is the gag. But within that structure is all improvisation.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like John Coltrane or Charlie Parker. Not so much Elvis, right? Because Elvis was all about that, you know, all about that hit single. But, you know, something that the connection between Latka and Elvis is that line, "Thank you very much," right? And that was Elvis's, you know, "Thank you very much. Thank you very much." But it was also, "Thank you very much. Thank you very much."
And Andy being an Elvis fan and wanting to be an Elvis impersonator and hiding out in the kitchen in Vegas to meet Elvis. I think that was an intentional thing. I sort of equate that to something that's like, it's so obvious that when somebody actually reaches for you, you're like, wow, why didn't anybody think of that before? You know, it's sort of like the Martha thing from Batman Hates Superman. It's like, you know, that was such an intentional pre-planned, ingrained thing in his act to have the foreign man's catchphrase be "thank you very much," because again, there's that juxtaposition, because he'll do "thank you very much" as Elvis, he'll end the act, and then he'll do "thank you very much" as the foreign man, and the crowd will erupt, you know.
And that's the punchline.
But
Frank,
he never carried the "thank you very much" into Tony Clifton.
no, Tony never said thank you.
No.
No, you thanked Tony.
Yes. There was a different word in the place of thank.
No, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So Frank, I do want to say that I get a sense as far as how you approach your podcasting and what you do, which is funny, Stuart. It's very similar to when you would. I find some of what Frank does very similar to when you were driving around Manhattan and the boroughs during the pandemic, right? So Frank, I find like there's a reality and an authenticity that you bring to what you do that I don't know if you would acknowledge or notice yourself, but I feel that is very Andy influenced, that sort of that persona, that man on the street kind of thing, when Andy would do that kind of thing. And I think that's what kind of put you on the radar of certain people. So in 2008, when you were invited to this Andy Kaufman press conference, again, that became a big deal, and that kind of put a lot of a lot of attention back on Andy. How did that feel, kind of being a part of that, and what happened after?
So, I mean, as it started off, I was a real heavy Twitter user back in 2008, which was the early days of Twitter, and I was posting like 50 times, 100 times a day, and this person who claimed to be Andy Kaufman said, "Hey, I enjoy your show, and would you like to interview me?" And he was claiming to be Andy Kaufman, who was still alive in 2008. And so I did the interview. He had a voice changer on, right? So he basically was acting as if he was Andy Kaufman, and had this long, like, I don't know, 2-hour interview with him. And that's how it started. And I was like fascinated, because I'm like, either this is really Andy Kaufman, which is pretty cool, because he faked his death and now he's coming back, or there's someone who is super obsessed with this idea that Andy faked his death and is now spending enormous amounts of time on the internet pretending to be Andy and continuing this legend. So when this press conference in November 2008 came up, this person, who we've later found is not Andy Kaufman, but is a guy named, we know him as Steve Maddox from Indianapolis, Indiana, asked if I would be sort of the host of the Andy Kaufman press conference in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. It sounds interesting. And so I arrived at the hotel the night before. I had a room there, and this guy comes in my room with a monster mask on, and this is the guy. And I was like, is it Andy or is it not? At that point, I still thought it may have been, I may have been in the presence of Andy Kaufman in a monster mask.
But he didn't have the voice changer at that point.
No,
what did his voice sound like?
The voice was not like Andy Kaufman, and
no, okay,
he was very tall, and so as we found out, this is a different person.
Yeah,
and I thought I was going to be let in on the joke, kind of like you talked about kayfabe. I thought I would be like brought into the secret. What the heck is going on? But I was not. Yeah. Even though I was hosting it, I was just like in the dark, like everyone else. And then the next day we had the press conference, which I'm sure you've all seen the footage of. And I recently put it back online, Manny the Mailman's footage. As you know, sort of nothing really happened. It was weird. There were puppet shows and everyone was upset. And
1 second, Frank. Manny, happy retirement, buddy.
Yes, Manny the Mailman is retiring now.
Congrats. Yeah. All right, go on.
So
I don't think I've ever seen that footage. Yeah, I need to watch this.
Yeah, it's on YouTube now.
Cool.
So as the years went on, I sort of met all of these people all over the world who were interested in this Andy Kaufman lives phenomenon. And I had roundtables like this back in like 2009, maybe 2010. And we've continued to sort of follow this phenomenon. And we found out, I started to get really fascinated by this guy, Steve Maddox. Like, who is this guy? Why is he like, this was my central question. Why is he so obsessed with this, so fixated on this matter? And last year when I was on your show, John, I talked, and Steve was on your show too. He came on your show.
Yep.
So I gave a synopsis of the news story he told last year, which was a very different story. And at the end of it, he's like, oh yeah, well, that's all BS. But now, and he said he was going to retire, but now he's back on X and he's continued to tell the same story, which generally is that he met Andy Kaufman when he was 17 years old. Andy and some friends came to his house in Indianapolis. Turns out there's a guy named Frank Inn, who's a very famous animal trainer. He trained especially Benji, if you remember Benji, all the Benji movies. And
The dog.
Yeah.
Yep.
So apparently this guy, Frank Inn, the animal trainer, this guy's cousin was married to Steve Maddox's aunt. So like there was some kind of family connection. And the other thing he's been saying, and this is where there's sort of a supernatural aspect to the whole thing, because I've always thought there's something a little beyond, something supernatural involved. I always thought Andy was sort of embodying the trickster archetype, which makes him almost like, like a lot of gods had that archetype, the trickster Loki or the Monkey King or Reynard the Fox, right? And I think that, to me, that is the thing that makes people so fascinated with Andy, because he has this, he's embodying this trickster archetype. But this guy Steve says that when he was 9, he had this mind-expanding vision of the universe, that there's this kind of code or this thing humming below the surface of reality that he tapped into. And he claims that when he met Andy, which would have been, because there was a family connection and he met Andy, that he started telling Andy about all his theories about how we need to have Jesus 2.0. This is another supernatural aspect to save humanity in the future. And he claims Andy was very taken by this theory, and he is implying now that he is the one. This guy, Steve Maddox, who is still active on X now as the Andy Kaufman, he says he's claiming that it was his ideas that pushed Andy to fake his own death, to eventually become sort of a future savior, a Jesus 2.0.
He's still sticking to this story?
He's still sticking to the story.
Commit to the bit, man. I mean, that's
He also
what
is
you do.
committing to the idea that after Andy died in 1984, he came and lived or visited Steve's house, and now he was pretending to be a deaf guy because Steve's father was deaf, named like Fletcher or something.
Fletcher, yeah.
Yeah. And he just said on X that there was video footage of Andy after 1984 as Fletcher, the deaf character, but he's like, he no longer has the footage. And also he says, in this whole universal system, no proof can ever be provided because that would ruin it. Great. That's like, like this whole thing, all we want is like proof, but we can never get the proof. So.
Well, it's like,
what about that tape? What about that tape that surfaced of Bob Smuda and Andy having that discussion about faking his death?
So that discussion, that's on the album Andy and His Grandmother, hanging behind me. If you can see that, yeah.
That blew my mind.
But so what's funny about that, though, in greater context, is that discussion was about ditching a girl. There was a girl that was bothering him, like that he dated, and he was trying to get rid of her. And they're like, what if we fake your death? And then it kind of leads into, oh, what if we just fake your death every month? Now, the question I have is, for me is, the timing of that, is that before or after Andy knew he was sick? If it's after,
go ahead. Sorry.
If it's after he knew that he was sick, then it's planting the seed for the greatest bit ever. And all he had to do was die, right?
But you see, the moment in that recording where he goes, yeah, and then Bob goes something like, but you'll be arrested for doing that if you fake your own. And he's, it's like that's almost such a real moment.
Yeah. As real as him telling Howdy Doody, I love you. It's one of those very few real moments.
But that was real. That was real.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The way they use that in the documentary too. It's just a great moment, and it really sells everything you've seen up to that point. And if you don't choke up in there, you are inhuman. And so we're at about the 10-minute mark. So Frank, we got up starting early, a little bit earlier. So Frank, I want to just, there was a new development recently, and I want you to tell us about that. And then Stuart, I want to hear about actually Andy's set, and then we'll do some closing remarks. So
Whatever I
Frank,
could remember. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like recently there again, this guy Steve, as the Andy Kaufman on X, was saying there's going to be this big announcement. It was like April 18th, whatever, and he's like, he was sort of implying they're going to announce a new press conference, which I thought was very cool. And he said, yes, the new press conference will be, I thought it was this coming November, there'll be a new press conference and we'll bring back all the people that were at it. And I thought that was really cool because a lot of the people there were very upset, and I don't know if we can get them back, but I thought it would be very fun. And I talked to Manny the Mailman. He was in, I was in. But then we found out that he actually was saying that he is going to announce the date of the Andy Kaufman press conference, which happened in 2008. And so it was a big scam of, as usual. Listen, I can't complain at this point. It's stuff always happens, but there is going to be no new press conference, apparently.
that is a great circular joke.
Unfortunately.
That's a great circular joke. I love it. It is such a Ouroboros. Yeah. And that's kind of what I appreciate that Steven does. And again, Steven does open the door for people to explore Andy. I know that that's part of his intention, but not his whole intention. I know that he has claimed that he has had help from some insiders, and I think that that's kind of cool. I think again that it's sort of that thing that that Lynn talks about in the documentary. You know, yes, we all want to know definitively, but what's the fun in knowing the truth when you could just have these games and these speculations and these conversations and this discovery and finding Andy's work out there and introducing it to other people, you know. So yeah, I know it's like the investigative journalism mind. You want the truth. You want to know what the truth is. Sometimes the truth will elude you. And I think again, people like Lynn, who has really done more than many others to carry the torch, to keep Andy's legacy going. I think, you know, again, I think that when you see the ripple effect, when you see how much what Andy did has informed media, informed our pop culture landscape, you know, again, I think it's so great to have that there for people to always refer to. So Stuart, what can you remember of Andy's main set there?
Oh, one other thing I wanted to touch on. I don't know if it's come out because I missed the beginning of this whole thing. But the guys who did the documentary afterwards, when they were being interviewed, had said that the reason you don't see the family's participation much in this documentary is that they apparently are working on their own documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Return of the Living Dead movies going on right now. There's two dueling revivals. Yeah. Sort of this very, very similar to when Bob was writing his book. The family was cooperating with Bill Zem. It definitely seems that there has been that separation between Andy's friends and compatriots and Andy's family. And
did any of you guys, I don't know if we've discussed this, John, but did you guys go to that Andy Kaufman exhibit that was downtown New York City?
I didn't make it to the exhibit. I was
there multiple days. I'm just wondering if anybody else went to that.
Yeah, I know we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, that I didn't go. Any of you guys go, or I don't think so.
No,
right?
I didn't go.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about it. I could have gone. I work in New York City, so.
And this was back 2009-ish.
I think so. Yeah. Each day there was somebody else associated with Andy that would sit there for the day. And
I did not hear about this. I don't know.
All of the stuff was on display. And so one day, you know, Bob was there. One day, Michael was there. One day, Lynn was there. And it was great. And you could just sit with them and talk to them, ask them questions, and look at all the Andy, you know, memorabilia and things that they had presented.
Yeah, I think that was put on by Participant Inc. There's probably some online articles archived. You could probably read about it. I believe the infamous Tony Clifton show at Santos Party House was part of that sort of week of celebration, because that's how I had heard about that show, was through Participant Inc. stuff. Yeah. So what do you remember of that set?
Well, I mean, just quickly, you know, was that Tony Clifton thing blew my mind, because, you know, I didn't know what that was about. That was the first time I had ever seen Tony Clifton on stage. And he did all the same shtick, if you're happy and you know it, poured the water on Smoot's head, had him run through the audience, you know, the woman came up on stage, all this stuff, you know, all the mind-blowing stuff, like, was that what the hell's going on here? Because, you know, all we knew was the Latka, you know, the foreign man, wasn't even Latka, the foreign man character from the TV shows. And then all of a sudden this town hall thing appeared, and it was all these different things, like, what is that real? Was that person? Did you see that? You know, that we were trying to figure out through the whole thing. Now, this was about, I don't know the exact date on the town hall show. You could probably look that up. I would say 77,
Okay.
but it might have been late 77, because I think in 1978, weren't the Ruddles in 78?
That makes sense. I think, yeah.
Okay,
That
because
sounds right.
after the show, when I went down to the front row with my friend, seated in the center of the front row was Paul Simon and Eric Idle.
Oh, cool.
Whoa.
And the way I can put that together is those bits for the Ruddles thing, the interview bits, were done in New York City, and that's probably why they were there.
Right on, right on. Oh, that's so cool. I am so envious that you got to see him, man. I am just envious of your life in general, but we've talked about that before.
I
But the
was
fact-
I was actually ready at one point when like, oh, either it was a woman or it was Bob, but when somebody stormed out of the theater, I was almost ready to get out of my seat and go follow and see if that was real, talk to that person. I swear, but I didn't, because there was so much more interesting. Everything was just taking place on the stage at that point. It was like, but for a second there, I almost did that.
Oh, wow. And look at this. It looks like we got Curt showing up for the last 4 minutes. So hey, Curt, how's it going?
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can't see you. So, Curt,
Okay.
unfortunately, we did start a little early, so we're wrapping up
That's
here.
right.
So I think the extent of what we're going to be able to do for you is we're going to have you give you a plug for your upcoming shows on the East Coast here. So really quick, I just want to, you know, look, Stuart, thank you for making it. Again, you're always welcome. We're going to have you on again, probably a little bit more even beyond our regular gig. Mathew, again, always a pleasure. Thank you for contributing. We're going to definitely, I think I want to do something with you and Frank, having to do with fish, and maybe bring a couple other folks along. Michael, again, thank you for coming on and joining. Always a good time. And Frank, again, thank you again. And I think, you know, we're going to probably do something again, you, me, and Curt. And look, Stuart, Michael, Matt, you want to join us to see some really good yacht rock in the summer. Let's see if we can work that out, summer or fall, I think. Hercules, again, thank you. Yeah, again,
Gotta plug Curt States, right?
yeah,
Or
we're going
no?
to do that. We're going to get to
Oh,
that.
okay.
I just wanted to give him enough time to do that. And I just want to say thank you, everybody. Go watch some
Thank
Andy
you.
Kaufman stuff. You know, thank you very much. Available on your streaming services to rent or for free on hoopla.com. Support your local library. If I wasn't slinging comics in my day to day, I would be a librarian, I believe. All right, Curt, you got about 2 minutes here. Tell us when we could see Yachtly Crew, and maybe we'll have a nice meetup going again. And we'll probably do another Andy Kaufman show down the road. But yeah, let's let her rip, Curt.
So we talk about New Jersey shows here.
Yeah, your New Jersey shows, because we're East Coast, all of us. So let's plug that for our East Coast
So
listeners.
October 9th, 10th, and 11th. We're going to be out at October 9th at the Mayo Performing Arts Center, October 10th at the Harrah's Resort Atlantic City, and then the 11th at Harrah's Resort Atlantic City too.
Okay,
So
the Mayo is in Montclair, New Jersey, correct? Or
oh, that's
Morristown?
Morristown. Sorry
Morristown,
about
New
that. That's
Jersey.
Morristown, New Jersey.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Morristown.
I think that's the one where we went last summer. I think I'm planning for that one for October. Frank, I hope you could be there. Michael,
Definitely,
Stuart,
I'll be
Matt
there.
will be in
I
talks.
love it.
Folks, you could go to yachtlycrew.com to see the rest of the dates and see Curt Clendenin in your area. And I think I have about a minute and a half left. So I just want to say, you know,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to say that I think it is amazing. You know, again, I know Matt from one area. I know Michael from another area. I know Stuart from another area. It is because of Andy Kaufman I know Frank and Curt, and the fact that we can all share this common appreciation, this that we could get together, we could talk, common interests leads to friendships forged. And I think that's a great way for us to approach everything that we're going to be approaching in the coming years. So again, look, may the force be with you. Thank you very much. Be good to each other. And as always, believe the impossible, because when you believe the impossible, anything can happen. This has been the Pep Talk, folks. Thank you, Andy.
And from Mount Olympus, thank you very much. I enjoyed the show. It was very entertaining and instructional. I'm looking forward to part 2.
Thank you.